You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the next segment of the second Doctor's final story, The War Games. We're discussing episodes 4 through 6 today. And I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, before we get started, I want to encourage you to go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from and write a review, leave a star rating, do something that helps us get the word out about our podcast to more people who might enjoy it, and to share the podcast with your friends. That's the number one way that the podcast grows is by you sharing it with others, and we do appreciate that. Stick around to the end. We do have more of your great listener feedback, and so you'll want to listen for that. And with that, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in this part of the War Games?
This week, Jamie and Lady Jennifer are still in the barn in the American Civil War zone. The barn changes hands a couple of times, and both times, Jamie and Lady Jennifer are regarded as spies due to the hypnotic influence of the warlord Von Weich. But eventually, a resistance group that has shaken off their hypnotic influence gains control and hold Von Weich prisoner. He's eventually shot after he tries to turn them against each other. The leader of the resistance, Russell, and Jamie end up taking a SIDRAT, that's a TARDIS-like device, to the control zone where the Doctor and Zoe already are. They have been exploring what's been going on in the control zone and learning about the conditioning that the warlords are putting the human soldiers through. But at one point, the Doctor and the War Chief recognize each other, and so they have to flee through the complex. Zoe is captured, and her hypnotic interrogation reveals to the security chief that she's from the 21st century, a time later than the warlords took any humans. This makes the security chief think about how only the War Chief has the power of time travel, and he gets suspicious. The security chief knows that the War Chief is a traitor to his own people, who are a mysterious race we've never heard of called the Time Lords. And although he's helping the warlords build an army now, it's also possible that the War Chief is planning to be a traitor to them too and keep the army for himself. The security chief also suspects it's possible that the Doctor is another member of the War Chief's people and that he's up to no good as well. Meanwhile, the Doctor is able to free Lieutenant Carstairs from the hypnotic conditioning that the warlords had put him under again, and then they get Zoe. But before they can leave, Jamie and Resistance leader Russell arrive. The Doctor sends Zoe back through a SIDRAT to organize an army because during her interrogation, the warlord showed her images of all the resistance leaders, so now she knows who they all are. The Doctor, Jamie, and Russell are to follow in their own SIDRAT, but the warlords are able to stop it from taking off, and then the War Chief uses its dimensional controls to start shrinking its internal dimensions and crush them inside of it. The end.
So, Jimmy, what'd you think of this part of the story?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm very much enjoying this rewatch. It's got a lot of really cool stuff in it. And we can talk about that as we go along, but I just thought they had lots of nice stuff in this.
Lots of action, lots of scenes of fisticuffs and fighting, which given the 10 episode length of it, they've got the time for, so they've really kind of indulged the War Games aspect of the story. I think, I'm happy that things have progressed. We've gone from being mainly in World War I, in the first set of episodes, the first 3. Now we've progressed to moving back and forth between basically the American South and the control zone. So, we've got this progression and maintaining that interest by changing the venue is always good when you have these long stories. So that's good. I had to make one note. Von Weich, the warlord, who's in the time zone, just looks like Jason Statham, the actor. I just as I'm watching, I'm like, man, that's just like if they remade this, it would be Jason Statham.
He, I think, is the Von Weich character is the weak spot in this. So they introduced him in the first 3 episodes as a German commanding officer who is the counterpoint to the British commanding officer. That's another one of the warlords, and we didn't really see him this time. Yeah. But for some reason, von Wyk shows up in the American Civil War zone, pretending to be a Confederate infantry captain. Not infantry, cavalry captain. And he's got the same monocle that he uses to hypnotize people. But I think he's a weak element in this. I was glad when he died, because he's just constantly there smirking and getting ready to betray people, and his Southern accent is terrible. And he comes across as this walking, smirking, evil cartoon to me.
Yeah. Anytime they have a monocle, it's going to be cartoonish. Yeah. The accents, the American accents are interesting in this one. The Union soldiers definitely have, like, especially the sergeant, very much a Northeastern, solidly 20th century Northeastern accent. Whereas I thought the soldiers, the Southern accents were better, at least more believable in that sense.
Yeah. One thing I really liked so I thought there were a number of things, since we were commenting on the zone we're in for much of this sequence. I thought they did a bunch of stuff really well. For one thing, it's not constantly being referred to as the Civil War, right? Because there were a variety of designations for it, and Civil War, even though that's the common one today, historically was not. At the time, it was commonly. It would get referred to a number of different ways, like the Second American Revolution and the War Between the States. That was one of the most neutral and common ways of doing it, and they tend to refer to it as the War Between the States, which is good and period accurate. I was interested to see it's interesting because the writers of this are not Americans, and so they're able to give a kind of outsider perspective on the American Civil War, which really wasn't a civil war. It wasn't for control of the civis. It was a revolution, like the American Revolution. But it's interesting. You've got this outsider perspective, and since it's the 1960s, it's not yet dominated by modern political correctness. And so they're able to do a few things that are quite period accurate that I wouldn't expect to see today. Like early on, when the Confederates get control of the barn and they come in and they see that the Yankees have tied up Lady Jennifer and Jamie, they're untying them, and Lady Jennifer is explaining, we're not Yankees, we were their prisoners, and I forget, I don't know if the officer even has a name, but he says, yeah, that's just like Yankees. They take over your house, tie you up, and steal your food. Right. And it's like, yes, those all were war crimes that were committed by Yankees during the War Between the States. And those were some of the milder ones. But those were period accurate. You had foragers sent out, and both sides had to do foraging, but Yankees in particular were known for coming into people's homes, tying them up, or worse, and stealing all of their food. And it wasn't just from white people they were stealing food. They would steal food from black people too, and they would not compensate them. And so it was interesting to see, okay, well, that's a nice little bit of history that I wouldn't have expected to show up in a Saturday evening tea time family viewing show. Yeah. They're being very delicate about it, but okay, that was surprising. Also, the uniforms they're using are quite accurate. I was noting that, with von Wyk's, he's a cavalry officer, and since he's an officer, he's got what are called chicken guts all over his sleeves. It's a kind of spirally pattern. And
the filigree of a
filigree, yeah. And the pattern, the piping on the different uniforms, and this is true of both sides, both for the Confederates and the Yankees, I'm noting, okay, the cavalry guys are wearing yellow piping. And I mean, you can tell because it's lighter than the background. And it's harder to tell for the infantry, but yeah, it looks like they're wearing blue piping and stuff. So it looks like their uniforms were quite accurate. We didn't really have any like chaplaincy, which would have been black piping, or general officers that would have been black piping. We didn't have any artillery, which would be red piping. You couldn't really tell that on black and white anyway. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, and I really liked when and we don't at first know that he's a member of the resistance. It turns out that 5% of the people the warlords hypnotize fail, and they get their memories back. And that's what happened to Lady Jennifer and Lieutenant Carstairs. But while they're in the barn, and it's you know, I guess it's under Confederate control at this point, and Von Wyck has hypnotized people into thinking that Jamie and Lady Jennifer are spies, even though, even though they had just come in and found them tied up. It's like, we were their prisoners, don't you remember? But no, they don't, under the hypnosis. But then this new soldier comes in, and his name is Harper, and he is a member of the resistance. And he helps Jamie and Lady Jennifer escape from their bonds, and he's the first member of the resistance that we meet in this time zone. And through him we get to meet all these other people from other time zones who have also joined the resistance. And he's doing his best to try to break through the conditioning that the warlords have put people under. He's telling everybody, guys, this is not the war between the states. You're not fighting the war between the states here. This is someone's playing a hoax on you. But of course, nobody listens to him because they're under hypnotic control. And what I liked, and they didn't make any big deal out of this, which makes me like it even more, but he happens to be black. And it's like, yes, there were black soldiers during the war between the states, between the American Civil War. Most of them were on the side of the Yankees. There were also black Confederates. We don't see that in this episode, but we do get extended time. I like the fact Harper is a major character in this. He's not just, even though he's black, he's not just being diminished and shuffled away. I mean, he is a major character, right? And I like that. I think that's great. Unfortunately, and this made me so mad. In part 6, or part 5, they're setting us up for Jamie's going to get shot with one of the warlords' ray guns. And to prove that that these ray guns are a threat, now the answer is going to be, well, they just had it on stun for Jamie, which is how he survives. But to prove these are a threat, they had some warlord guards come in a SIDRAT, and when they got out, they used their ray guns and they killed Harper. And it's like, he was a great character. I wanted to, come on, kill somebody else. I want this guy to live.
He gets in a fight with another one of the resistance guys too, as well. Like there's a whole scene of them fighting over Jamie and Lady Jennifer, and him, defending them, protecting them. I mean, I kind of wanted him to be the leader of the resistance. That would have been fun. I would have been fine with that. This Russell guy, who cares? But Harper, I mean, he's a natural leader. He's a smart guy. I really like this character. So I want to go back to a couple of things you said about the politeness of the Confederate soldiers. The soldier's name was Leroy.
Oh, okay.
And when he first gets there, he unties Lady Jennifer, who thanks him, and he says, "Oh, just like Yankees to treat a lady like this," which I thought was fun. He was very Southern gentleman. That was good. And then the whole thing about stealing people's food, how awful the crime is. I'll try to use a simpler word. Is magnified by the fact that 1860 people didn't buy their food at the supermarket. They didn't just go back to the Piggly Wiggly and restock their cupboards. You steal people's food. That's the food they have to live on for the winter. They will starve to death, perhaps. That makes it an even greater crime than just, emptying their cupboards.
Yeah. And that's what would happen is, now both sides had to provision their armies. And so there were foragers for both sides, but you're supposed to compensate people.
Yeah.
And once, especially after Sherman began his total war campaign, they weren't compensating anybody. They were coming in and the rationale was, you want to this is the justification that was used for what they did. But the idea was we want to deprive the Confederacy of every resource possible so that they can't prolong the war. And so you go in and you take all of the stuff in their house, whether it's food or not. You take their piano, you take their dresses, you take their mirrors, you take everything, you burn the house, and you take all of their farm animals and all of their food and anything you can't take with you. If it's a farm animal, you kill it. And if it's edible, you burn it. Right. And so this was a deliberate attempt to starve civilians.
Yeah.
And it was part of federal war policy.
Scorched earth.
Yeah.
There is an interesting moment where the soldiers, I think it might have been when it was the Union soldiers, you're either with us or against us. There's no neutral here. And the war between the North and the South. And Jamie's like, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And Lady Jennifer's, the American Civil War, Jamie, remember? And it's like, poor Jamie, that's like, he predates the American Civil War by 100 years. It's like, right, this thing, and in another continent before America even exists, or at least as a country.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting, all these people from different times and eras who are having to negotiate what we know about what's going on. It's a lot for the writers to keep track of. Never mind the characters.
And it's a lot for Jamie, but as usual, he just rolls with it. Okay, whatever.
Yep. In fact, there's a point where he's got the ray gun from the warlords soldiers, and he's explaining to the Civil War era soldiers that it's a gun, because he's seen ray guns now quite a bit. So he's the one who can explain to them that it's a weapon. So the war chief emphasizes, that all this is in service of a greater plan, which, like I think you mentioned, they're trying to develop an army of soldiers pulled from throughout time on Earth. They're focused on Earth for whatever reason. And the only reason they're still doing all this is because of the 5% rate, that it's not perfected yet. This is all a test, weapons testing range, essentially, where they're trying to perfect their weapon of indoctrination of these people in order to make them soldiers for the warlords. So I think that's interesting, although we don't get a lot of detail on what they're going to use this army for, but presumably
conquer somebody.
Yeah. We do get a sort of a moment where they want to explain to us what's going on finally. So we have this lecture that the Doctor and Zoe stumble on, this classroom for warlord reenactors, I suppose, by the scientist who just kind of stereotypically the absent-minded or sort of easily duped scientist character that the Doctor,
who is fun, given, repeatedly, the Doctor will dupe him in just casual little ways, and he always thanks the Doctor without realizing he's been duped at first.
By the way, this process reversible? Well, of course it's reversible. I don't believe you. Well, let me show you how. Was the war chief chasing you? No, that was the girl. I was chasing after her.
When you were the one who yelled "run" a few minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. So we do establish, the conditioning that it does wear off in some cases. We get to see Lieutenant Carstairs again being processed and then unprocessed, deprocessed. And so we get that. We do have the war chief recognizing the doctor, as you mentioned. So
and they know each other.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I like about, so a couple of thoughts about sort of this sequence in what we watched. In the control zone, they have a surprising number of interesting sets to look at. You know, they're not all the same. Like the security office has these crazy spiral patterns in it. Mm-hmm. And there are others that have like plastic flower looking designs that look like something from the dating game. And others have, there's just a whole bunch of really creative alien looking stuff to look at in this sequence. I don't know if they were trying to blow their budget, for the end of the season, but they spent more money on interesting looking alien designs than I would have expected. I mean, they could have come up with one design and used it over and over again, which is what they normally do, but they don't here. There's lots of visual diversity to look at in this. They also have interesting visors that they wear. They have interesting costumes that they wear in the control zone, their warlord costumes. I mean, the lowly guards, I mean, they're basically wearing skin diver suits, but they do have the upper, like the scientist and the security chief, they get more interesting costumes. They also have, these fascinating alien control systems where it's not just pushing buttons. Instead, they're like magnetic boards, and you put components on the magnetic board, and they stick, and you arrange them in different patterns to make the machines do different things.
I like that.
It is different. I really like that too. So I thought a lot of really great design work that went into the control zone and what the alien technologies look like. And at the same time they're doing this, they're dropping hints. It's like the doctor is talking to Zoe, and Zoe is like, "Doctor, do you think you could make these work?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't think it'll be too hard, Zoe." And they're hinting that he's familiar. And they become more explicit over time, that where by the end, the doctor's telling Jamie, well, the design isn't exactly the same as the TARDIS, but we've been hinting around it's similar. Yeah. And, and early on in the sequence, when the doctor and Zoe are first in the SIDRAT, she's like, it's like the TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside. Who else would have machines like that, doctor? And he says, well, there is an answer, but I don't want it to. And then he kind of trails off. Yeah. And so they're setting us up step by step and helping us note the similarities between the technology that the warlords have and that the doctor has. And so it's clear we're building to the reveal of the doctor's people. And they actually drop the name Time Lord on us in episode 5, where you have the scientist and the security chief are talking about the warlord. The war chief, and the war chief's people. The Time Lords, and just bang, there's the name, but it's not yet connected to the doctor. And then they start. So we know the war chief is a Time Lord, but we don't know anything else about who they are. But they're building up. The doctor has the same kind of technology as the war chief does, and so
they recognize,
and then they recognize each other. Yeah. And it's a riveted moment. It's like these two guys know each other from their pasts. Yeah. And the security chief begins speculating maybe the doctor is a member of the war chief's people. And so they haven't put all the pieces together yet and said the doctor is a Time Lord, but that's where we're headed. And it's a really nice slow build. And I really like how they're doing that. Right.
Again, watching it as if for the first time, you have to realize, this is new. This isn't, oh, the doctor's a Time Lord. This would have been new to the viewer. You mentioned the sets I mean, given, the complexity of the control zone sets, but even just the fact that they were World War I sets and vehicles and multiple outdoor locations, and the Civil War sets, they had a few outdoor locations, but which were just basically open areas. No, there's no buildings or anything. But that was indoors. But nevertheless, there's still, like you said, there's a lot of sets, a lot of costumes, a lot going on. They really went all out for this serial. So that is really interesting.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to comment on the War Chief's plan. By the way, there's another character that we haven't met yet called the Warlord.
Yes.
We will meet him next week, but we haven't met him yet. And he's getting this long, slow intro, which according to Orson Welles is the best kind of intro you can have as an actor, where everybody, if you have a delayed arrival where your character doesn't show up immediately, but everyone's talking about your character, it builds up how important you are in the mind of the audience. If everyone's talking about this guy we haven't even seen yet. In fact, I saw Orson Welles once give he was talking about, he thought it was the best role he ever had. I forget what the name of the character was, Mr. X. But he apparently in some movie or play, he played this character who didn't appear until the very end. But the whole production, people are talking about Mr. X and what does Mr. X think about this and what is Mr. X going to do and so forth. And then finally he shows up at the end. This is like a more exaggerated version of what we have in The Third Man, where Orson Welles plays Harry Lime. And for the first half of The Third Man, we hear all about Harry Lime, and Harry Lime did this and Harry Lime did that. And everyone thinks Harry Lime is dead. And then at the midway point through The Third Man, Harry Lime is alive. And now we have to deal with the human reality behind everything we've heard about Harry Lime up to now. And they're given the Warlord the same kind of buildup, where we're here, everyone's threatening to go to the Warlord and tell him about this and tell him about that, and then you'll see. And so they're building him up as this very powerful, important character that we just haven't met yet. And I like that. But when it comes to the War Chief, so we know he was found or somehow got in contact with the warlords and offered to build them an army, and he had the time travel technology that powers the SIDRATs and the bigger inside than outside stuff. He pulled people through time, but not after 1917, because after that, they have an explanation of, well, people were getting so technologically advanced, it would be more dangerous to pull people from after that.
Right.
So they at least
wouldn't necessarily work, I think they said.
Yeah, so they at least have an explanation. It's not, I personally, I think you could pull some World War II soldiers and they wouldn't be advanced enough given this technology, but they're trying. But so the War Chief is a traitor to his own people, the Time Lords. He brought all this technology to this alien race to build an army, and the security chief of these people becomes concerned he's going to want to keep that army for himself. And it's like, this is such a master plan. The master is always allying with people to build an army, and then he's going to want to keep control of the army in the end. It's like, this is just more fuel for the fire. The master and the War Chief are the same character as far as I'm concerned.
Right. That's a classic trope, is the dissension in the ranks of the enemy, because they're unreliable, they're bad guys. And so they're not going to trust each other. And that's going to cause the essential conflict that allows our hero to slip in and to bring it all down. So it is interesting, that the security chief begins to suspect that the War Chief is not loyal to the warlord. And that's the essential conflict that begins, and he has withheld information from the security chief that he does know that the doctor is of his race. So I do think that's interesting. The doctor kind of risks everything at one point, especially when they're trying to escape from the control zone to go back for that processing machine. He really wants to get that processing machine, I guess, so he can start deprocessing people, deprogramming people, and to build up the resistance so that he can undermine the control zone. So I thought it was very interesting to see how, he goes back a couple times for it, and has to risk everything for it.
I like how they mention, so Zoe has a photographic memory, and they don't use the term in this story, but they rely on it. So I like how while they have Zoe hypnotized, the warlord, the security chief, shows her all these pictures of resistance leaders. And it's like, do you know any of these? And it turns out she doesn't know any of them, but now she knows who they all are, and she can go organize an army for the doctor.
Right. She can go and find those resistance leaders. Yep. It was a mistake on their part. It is interesting to see the TARDIS, the SIDRAT, which is essentially a TARDIS, the bigger the inside being used against the doctor. The fact that he can manipulate it smaller. That is interesting to see, and a good cliffhanger for this episode.
I have nice attack method in my notes for that, because they've emphasized nothing can get into the TARDIS, but you don't have to get into the TARDIS if you can control its dimensions. You can just crush the people inside, and suddenly taking this SIDRAT and making it smaller on the inside is a nice attack strategy. I really like that. So
Jamie refers to it as the green box, which, given that it's black and white, is hard to see. But that reminds me that we had discussed
is a blue box.
Yeah, but it reminds me of the fact that we mentioned last time, but neither of us had watched the War Games in Color, which was a shortened, colorized version of this story. It was like a 90-minute version of this story that the BBC put out at the end of 2024. Have you had a chance to see that since then?
Not yet, but I'm planning on watching it this week if I can.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about it more in depth. I watched the first, I guess the part that covers the first 3 episodes that we had already talked about, which was interesting to see what they excised from the story, what they felt that they could lose and still maintain the story. So it'll be interesting to maybe discuss that next time when we get to the last part of the War Games. Any other notes on this one, Jimmy?
One thing that I really liked is a visual gag that they have that's just characteristic of the humor for the period. Patrick Troughton was a prankster, and Fraser Hines was a prankster. And the two of them, once Jamie came on board the show, developed a natural comedic chemistry. Like famously, for example, back in Tomb of the Cybermen, when they're in this scary situation in Tomb of the Cybermen, and they're both Jamie and the doctor are trying to comfort Victoria, who was the companion at the time, Victoria Waterfield. And they're looking around for Cybermen and stuff. They're looking around for sources of danger, but like they think they're holding Victoria's hand, to comfort her, and they don't realize they're actually holding hands with each other. And then they turn around and see what they're doing, and they instantly, drop hands. But that was a nice visual element of humor that was introduced, and this was characteristic of Patrick Troughton's time as the doctor. The actors would come up with these little bits of comedic business. And once Winnie Padbury came on board, Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton would both, prank her, and she would prank them back.
Yep.
And especially those three had a mutual pranking relationship going on, which I've read about, is behind the camera, but they also would do stuff on camera. So at one point, the doctor is talking about, they've got this wall that they say is held together by a magnetic force field, and the doctor wants to disrupt the magnetic force field that is holding the wall together. And so he's got this wire that he's looping around stuff on the wall, and he has Zoe taping the wire in place so they can then run current through it and it'll disrupt the magnetic field. And he's pointing to where to put the pieces of tape, and she's tearing them off a roll of masking tape and putting them down. And he says, and one right here, and he puts his finger on this point on the wall, and she just tapes his finger to that point. and then the camera cuts away, and they don't make anything out of it. It's just, she just puts a piece of tape right over his finger and tapes it to the wall. And then we cut away, and it's never mentioned again. And it's just a nice, subtle little bit of visual humor that the actors probably came up with, and I thought that was great.
That is good. All right. So anything else? I think, is that it?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so that ends our discussion.
Justice for Harper, though. That guy totally needed to live.
This is Justice for Harper. Hashtag. Yeah. And so next time we'll be talking about the last 4 episodes of this serial, which will include the regeneration of the second Doctor sequence. So that should be interesting. Mm-hmm. Before we go, I did mention we have some listener feedback. This goes all the way back to our episode 148 when we discussed the 10th Doctor story, Midnight. Tony wrote on our YouTube video, I'm here because I watched Jimmy's recent video about where to start with Doctor Who and then watched Midnight. Definitely an innovative horror concept, being a horror fan myself. Guess I will move on to Blink and the other 2. Thanks.
Hope you enjoy
Tony, you have a great journey ahead of you. There's much Doctor Who that you will enjoy in the future. Jimmy, did you do that video on your Jimmy Akin podcast? Or
no, I was doing a live stream and just taking questions, and someone asked where to start watching Doctor Who, and then I cut up the live stream to get individual questions.
Okay. Good. Yeah, because I think we talked about that too in this podcast at some point, sometime back as well, in one of our anniversary episodes of 100s or something. Excellent, very good. So thank you, Tony, and welcome. So we'd like to take a moment now to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Joe E., Stephen Y., Timothy J., Jedediah H., and Edward C. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We would love to hear what you thought of this part of the War Games, or any part of the War Games. But this time we were talking about episodes 4 to 6. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can leave a comment and watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. You should, hit the bell to get notifications and subscribe. We'll be back next time when we will be discussing the finale of the War Games, episodes 7 to 10. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, in a civil war, ma'am, no one's neutral.